I'm not gonna end it like this.
Even with all the power in the world, you are still weak.
The most important moment in Avatar history isn't when Aang defeats Ozai, it's when Katara's waterbending cracks open that iceberg. What if that split second never happened? Without this crucial moment, the entire world falls to the Fire Nation. This documentary maps out every devastating consequence of Aang's continued slumber. We'll trace how characters develop without his influence, follow the Fire Nation's unstoppable expansion, and examine how resistance movements might form when people realize no chosen one is coming to save them. The world of Avatar becomes unrecognizable, darker, more desperate, but with unexpected heroes emerging from the shadows when they're needed most. Picture this, a teenage girl and her brother out on a fishing trip bickering as siblings do. Katara gets frustrated with Sokka's sarcasm and throws her arms up in exasperation. The water responds to her movements, but only slightly, not enough to crack open any hidden icebergs nearby. Their argument ends with eye rolls and sighs as they paddle back to their tiny village, unaware that beneath the frozen surface lies the world's last hope. Katara's waterbending abilities would remain primitive and limited. In her small tent at night, we'd see her straining to manipulate water in a bowl, tears running down her face as the liquid barely rises before splashing back down. Without a journey to the Northern Water Tribe, she'd never meet Master Pakku, never learn the advanced techniques that made her formidable. She would practice the same rudimentary movements for years, reaching for something greater, but feeling that potential slipping through her fingers like water itself. The Southern Water Tribe would face intensifying destruction. Fire Nation ships with blood-red flags would appear more frequently on their horizons. We can imagine a specific raid where soldiers with flames dancing in their palms torch the last ceremonial meeting hall, while tribal elders clutch sacred scrolls to their chests, the history of their people reduced to ashes before their eyes. Sokka would stand alone on the ice walls, his boomerang clutched in trembling fingers, watching his world crumble. Without the journey that shaped him into a tactical genius, he'd remain that boy with grand ideas, but no way to implement them. His clever mind trapped in a shrinking reality where his plans to defend the village fall short again and again. The devastating blow would come. Word that Hakoda and the other warriors had been captured or killed. With no avatar to help free prisoners at the Boiling Rock, Katara and Sokka would become orphans and reluctant leaders in one devastating moment. Katara's path toward darkness would begin with desperation. Remember how she tracked down her mother's killer? Without Aang's influence to temper her anger, she might embrace bloodbending willingly, seeing it as their only weapon against overwhelming force. Their ancestral home abandoned, the siblings would lead survivors across ice fields. Sokka would develop guerrilla tactics suited to the harsh environment, while Katara would use her increasingly lethal waterbending for ambushes. They'd transform from children into hardened resistance leader. As the Water Tribe siblings became legends of resistance, a scarred prince sailed endlessly under distant skies, his hope diminishing with each empty horizon. But the true tragedy of Prince Zuko isn't that he never finds the Avatar. It's what happens when a man with no purpose finally gives up and returns home to the father who burned him. 3 years into his banishment, Zuko's small crew began to desert him one by one. His uncle Iroh remained steadfast, brewing tea and playing Pai Sho, watching his nephew's desperate search grow increasingly futile. Imagine searching for someone who doesn't exist, your only chance at redemption fading with each passing day. Without the Avatar to stop him, Admiral Zhao invaded the Northern Water Tribe and killed the Moon Spirit. The night the moon turned blood red before vanishing forever marked waterbending's decline worldwide. Benders felt their power diminish until they could barely move a cup of water. The Fire Nation called it divine justice, proof that even the spirits favored their cause. After 5 years, something inside Zuko finally broke. The constant failure hollowed him out completely. What remained of that honorable young prince who once spoke against sacrificing soldiers? He returned to the Fire Nation palace not as a captor of the Avatar, but as a supplicant, begging for any scrap of honor his father might bestow. Ozai welcomed his son back with amusement, seeing only a broken prince who would obey without question. Your sister hunts traitors, Ozai told him. You will hunt hope, crush any resistance, make examples of their leaders. And Zuko, desperate for approval, did exactly that. The prince who once showed mercy to the Southern Water Tribe became known as the Ashmaker. Villages that refused to surrender weren't just conquered, they were erased. Zuko's face, already marked by one scar, became unrecognizable. not from new burns, but from the emptiness behind his eyes. He collected Earth Kingdom resistance leaders like trophies, presenting them to his father in chains. Iroh eventually abandoned him, saying, "I have lost my son twice, once to death and once to something worse." The words echoed against memories of gentle wisdom that once tempered Zuko's rage. When Sozin's comet returned and Ozai crowned himself Phoenix King, he named Azula as Fire Lord instead. The look on Zuko's face wasn't rage or jealousy, it was emptiness. The final realization that his father would never give him what he truly wanted, and still, he served. General Zuko led Ba Sing Se's occupation, ruling through fear where his sister preferred manipulation. When captured fighters called him monster, he didn't even flinch. What does a monster care for the opinions of its prey? As the flames of war devoured the Western Earth Kingdom, the wealthiest families of Jialing remained blissfully insulated from the conflict. Behind the high walls of the Beifong estate, a small blind girl continued her double life. Pampered heiress by day, undefeated Earth Rumble champion by night. But what happens when extraordinary talent never finds its purpose? When the greatest earthbender who ever lived remains forever hidden behind walls of privilege and parental fear? Toph Beifong existed like a flame encased in glass, brilliant and powerful, yet contained and denied oxygen to truly blaze. Her days followed the same suffocating pattern, endless etiquette lessons and being led around by servants as if she couldn't navigate perfectly on her own. Through her feet, she could see every heartbeat, every breath, every lie, but her parents saw only fragility in her blindness. The underground fighting tournaments became her sanctuary. Each night she would sneak out, feeling the vibrations of the cheering crowd as the blind bandit sent opponents flying from the ring, yet without true challenges like an airbender whose movements she couldn't sense. Toph's abilities plateaued. Her potential to revolutionize earthbending, even to discover metal bending, remained dormant, stunted by her limited environment. Everything changed when her father overheard business associates discussing rumors about a blind girl dominating Earth Rumble tournaments. That night, Lao Beifong followed his daughter, witnessing with horror as his helpless child commanded boulders twice her size. By morning, the estate guards doubled, and Toph became truly imprisoned. "I've already contacted Master Yu about intensifying your earthbending lessons," her father announced over breakfast with strained cheerfulness. "And the son of Merchant Ling has expressed interest in meeting you." At 12 years old, Toph learned that arranged marriages were another form of cage. Her parents accelerated plans to transfer her from their protection to a husband's care, ensuring she would never taste independence. As Ozai's forces advanced, the Beifongs increased donations to Earth Kingdom generals, buying protection, while poorer towns burned. When Fire Nation tanks finally rolled into Jialing, they came with specific intelligence about a powerful earthbender hidden among the elite. "The Beifong estate holds something the Phoenix King desires," the commander announced. "A weapon that could inspire resistance." With soldiers threatening her family, Toph finally unleashed her full power. Earth walls erupted, soldiers sank into liquefied ground, and briefly, the Fire Nation troops retreated. But without tactical experience, Toph couldn't anticipate the fire bombs raining from above. As the Beifong estate burned and her parents were dragged to Fire Nation prisons, Toph heard her father's last words. "This is why we tried to protect you." The spark in glass had finally shattered its container, but too late. Sozin's comet blazed across the sky as hundreds of Fire Nation airships darkened the horizon, bringing with them a power unlike anything the world had ever seen. The day Ozai had planned for his entire reign had arrived, and with no avatar to stand in his way, the most powerful firebending force in history descended upon a defenseless world. The answer to what would happen next was written in ash and flame across an entire continent. Ozai stood at the helm of his flagship, his eyes reflecting the orange glow that enhanced his bending 100-fold. "Today is the day we finish what my grandfather started," he announced to his generals. "Today, the Earth Kingdom burns." And burn it did. The airships rained down endless streams of amplified fire that transformed forests into wastelands, villages into smoking craters, and farmlands into blackened earth. From above, it looked like the continent itself was being erased, rewritten in Fire Nation red. Ba Sing Se discovered that its impenetrable walls meant nothing when the enemy could simply fly over them. The outer and middle rings were reduced to rubble in hours. The inner ring lasted until nightfall before surrendering. The Earth King's palace became Ozai's first headquarters on conquered soil. In a ceremony amid the charred remains of the Earth King's throne, Ozai discarded the title of Fire Lord and placed a new crown upon his head, shaped like a phoenix rising from flames. "The old world is dead," he declared, his voice carrying a weight that silenced even his most hardened generals. "From its ashes, I rise as Phoenix King, ruler of all lands, all peoples, all elements." Unlike in our familiar timeline, Azula never faced the friends who would have defeated her. Without these crucibles to crack her perfect facade, her calculated cruelty only sharpened. "Make our nation the unquestioned center of the world," Ozai commanded as he installed her as Fire Lord. She proved herself the perfect instrument of her father's will. The Northern Water Tribe's ice walls melted before enhanced firebending techniques. Within a week, their ancient city became a Fire Nation colonial port. "To truly win," Azula explained to her war ministers, "we must ensure future generations know only the glory of fire." The Fire Nation embarked on the burning of culture, destroying ancient libraries, criminalizing other bending arts, and separating children from parents who practiced inferior arts. Within a decade, the world transformed. Fire Nation factories belched smoke over former Earth Kingdom towns. The red and black banners of the Phoenix King hung everywhere. The few remaining benders of other elements practiced in secret, passing down diminishing knowledge through whispered lessons. Those whispered lessons in hidden caves would become the seeds of something the Phoenix King never anticipated. What happens when people stop waiting for a savior who never comes? As the oppression grew more severe, ordinary people across the world started asking a dangerous question. What if we are the ones we've been waiting for? And the answer to that question would shake the very foundations of Ozai's empire. It began with small acts of defiance. A merchant accidentally spilled a cart of supplies meant for Fire Nation troops. A farmer risked everything hiding a family of refugees in their barn through bitter winter months. Children drew the symbols of other nations in chalk that washed away with rain but remained in hearts. These tiny rebellions seemed insignificant alone, but they connected across continents through networks that had existed long before Ozai's reign. The Order of the White Lotus emerged from shadows like spring flowers after winter. Once merely philosophers and pie show enthusiasts, they transformed into the backbone of worldwide resistance. Their lotus tile became more than a game piece. It became hope passed between strangers, marking safe houses and secret passages throughout occupied territories. Grandmaster Zhong Zhong established swamp training camps where deserters learned to use firebending to protect rather than destroy. Pakku navigated underground waterways, connecting isolated waterbenders practicing in flooded caves. King Bumi escaped during a solar eclipse when guards' firebending weakened, led raids from tunnels beneath former Omashu. But resistance wasn't just ancient masters. Suki expanded the Kyoshi warriors into the Painted Shadows, an all-female guerrilla force specializing in infiltration. Their painted faces honored Avatar Kyoshi while declaring their chosen legacy. The Mechanist created flying machines carrying messages of hope across vast distances. His son Teo led disabled refugees, proving innovation overcame any limitation the Fire Nation dismissed. In forests, Jet transformed from leading orphans to commanding the largest rebel army in the former Earth Kingdom. His freedom fighters liberated entire villages where Earth Kingdom traditions survived for children born under occupation. The resistance even spread within the Fire Nation through the Spark of Balance movement, loyal to Fire Lord Zuko the Elder's vision of prosperity through balance rather than domination. The resistance couldn't match Ozai's armies or Azula's elite benders. Their victories remained small, their losses devastating, yet with each passing season, their network grew stronger like roots through stone. They weren't fighting to defeat the Phoenix King, they were fighting to outlast him, to be the forest that remains when the wildfire finally burns itself out. In a world without the Avatar, darkness consumes everything. But what if this story was always about ordinary people responding when no chosen one arrives to save them? The cycle broke when Aang never emerged, but something remarkable happened instead. The world fought back without their destined hero. Resistance movements bloomed in the shadows of Phoenix King Ozai's reign. The Painted Shadows, the White Lotus, the Freedom Fighters. They carried forward the spirit of balance when no Avatar could. Like seasons changing despite winter's grip, hope persists. Somewhere in the frozen Northern Water Tribe ruins, a child was born carrying a faint spark of the Avatar spirit. The next Water Tribe Avatar would emerge into a world that didn't wait passively, but had already begun healing itself. What if Aang never woke up? Then the world would find its own strength instead.